According to the latest scientific research, government-mandated lockdowns do not appear to stop the spread of COVID-19. This is really important to look at from a scientific perspective because politicians are claiming that their government-mandated lockdowns are the reason that 2 million Americans did not die from COVID-19. And therefore, politicians are using that as a justification to continue these draconian lockdowns. But correlation does not equal causation. So did the government-mandated lockdowns work? It does not appear so. Here's the science. A Stanford scientist named Dr. T.J. Rogers ran a study comparing the death rates in U.S. states that locked down early versus states that locked down late. And he found statistically there's basically no correlation between the lockdowns and COVID-19 deaths. Rogers writes in the Wall Street Journal, and I quote, "We ran a simple one-variable correlation of deaths per million and days to shut down, which range from -10 days, some states shut down before any sign of COVID-19, to 35 days for South Dakota, one of 7 states with limited or no shutdown. The correlation coefficient was 5.5%, so low that the engineers I used to employ, he says, would have summarized it as no correlation and moved on to find the real cause of the problem," end quote. In addition, German and Swiss studies showed the reproduction rate of the COVID-19 virus slowed to 1, which means each infected person only infects one other person, which means the epidemic can't expand before the government-mandated lockdowns in those countries. Look at the data. How did Germany and Switzerland slow the spread? With individual social distancing, hand hygiene, masks, and cancellation of large events. The lockdowns made no statistical difference. Furthermore, a new preprint from scientist Thomas Meunier found that full lockdowns in Western European nations had no impact on the COVID-19 epidemic, but individual social distancing did. Meunier found that the lockdowns in each country he studied, Italy, France, Spain, and Great Britain, were imposed right at the peak of deaths. But remember, there's a lag of 22 days before behavior changes impact deaths. So it wasn't the lockdowns that impacted deaths. It was the individual social distancing measures that were implemented weeks earlier. And that's not all. Data pulled from Apple Maps about users' mobility shows that in New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the government lockdowns had only limited impact in reducing people's activity. This data shows that individual social distancing on a voluntary basis was enough to change people's behavior, and the lockdowns had only a negligible impact after the voluntary individual social distancing was taking effect. In other words, people in these big cities had already gone quiet before the government imposed lockdowns. In other words, the science and the data-driven evidence shows that government-mandated lockdowns do not work. And politicians who claim lockdowns do work are ignoring the science.